I came home from my sister's place in Sudbury on a Sunday evening in late October, and the moment I turned the key in the lock, something felt wrong. I can't explain it better than that. 63 years on this earth teaches you to notice the air in a room before you see anything. The house was too quiet. Not empty quiet. There were shoes by the door, coats on the hooks, but the kind of quiet that happens when people stop talking because they heard you coming. My husband was sitting at the kitchen table. My daughter was beside him. And across from them, with her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a bus, was my closest friend of 31 years. I stood in the doorway with my overnight bag still on my shoulder. "What's going on?" I said. My husband looked at my daughter first. Just a glance. That glance told me everything, though I wouldn't let myself understand it for another few minutes. "Mom," my daughter said. "Come sit down." "I'm fine standing. What is this?" My friend, I'll call her my friend, though that word would be dead to me by the end of the night, looked out the window. She couldn't meet my eyes. My husband said, "We need to talk about some things. About us. About the future." I was 63 years old. I had worked 31 years as a property assessor for the municipality. I had raised one daughter in this house in Barrie, Ontario. I had shoveled this driveway and planted those lilac bushes by the front walk and repainted the porch railing 3 times. I had been married for 38 years, and my husband was sitting at my kitchen table with my closest friend, telling me we needed to talk about the future. I put my bag down on the floor very slowly. "How long?" I said. He tried to explain. There were words, something about loneliness, something about connection, something about how he hadn't meant for it to happen. My daughter kept reaching across and touching his arm. Not my arm, his. "How long?" I said again. 14 months, my friend said, still looking at the window. 14 months. My granddaughter had been born 14 months ago. I had been at the hospital. My friend had been at the hospital. We had stood in that corridor together, my husband and I, and her husband, all of us waiting for news. 14 months ago, while I was crying happy tears over a new life coming into the world, this had already started. My daughter said, "Mom, they love each other. I know this is hard, but they love each other, and I think it would be better for everyone if you could just—" "You knew," I said. She looked down at the table. "You knew, and you didn't tell me. It wasn't my place. I'm your mother." Nobody said anything after that. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went past on the street. I picked up my bag from the floor. "I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight," I said. "Don't call me." My husband stood up. "Gail, you don't have to." "Don't," I said, just that one word, and I left. I sat in the parking lot of a Tim Hortons on Dunlop Street for almost an hour before I could drive properly. I had $43 in my wallet and a Visa card that I knew had barely anything left on it because we had a joint account, and I had never thought to question that. I had my overnight bag with 2 days' worth of clothes and my toiletries and a library book. I hadn't started yet. I called my older sister in Sudbury, the one I had just left that morning. "I just got home," she said, "and you're already calling. What happened?" I told her. She was quiet for a long time. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" she said. "I'll find a motel. Come back up here." "It's a 3-hour drive, Helen." "I'll be fine." I found a place on Dunlop, a small motel that took cash. $41 a night. I had exactly $2 left after that, and I sat on the edge of the bed in a room that smelled like old carpet and window cleaner, and I thought about what I actually had. I had my car, a 2017 Civic, in my name only because we had bought it for my commute, and the loan had been mine. I had my pension from 31 years with the municipality, my pension in my name that I had contributed to myself. I had my RRSP, which I had been quietly putting money into since 1994, separate from our joint savings, because my mother had always told me a woman should have her own account, and I had listened to her even when I thought she was being old-fashioned. I had the library book. And I had one other thing. 3 years ago, when I started to feel something shift between us, nothing I could name, nothing dramatic, just a cooling, a distance, I had gone to see a lawyer, not to file anything, not to accuse anyone of anything, just to understand what my situation would be, in the worst case. The lawyer, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, had told me exactly what my rights were under the Family Law Act in Ontario. She had told me about equalization of net family property. She had told me about the matrimonial home. She had told me that regardless of whose name was on the mortgage, I had rights to that home. I had filed that information away and hoped I would never need it. I had been wrong about the hoping part. I was at the lawyer's office Monday morning when it opened. I had called from the motel at 8:15. I wore the same clothes I had traveled home in. My lawyer, I'll call her mine now because she became mine, listened to everything I said. She asked me a few quiet questions. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, "You're in a better position than you think." She explained that our house in Barrie, the one I had lived in for 27 years, the one I had painted and planted and repaired and maintained, that house was the matrimonial home, and I had an equal right to it under Ontario law, regardless of how the mortgage was structured. She explained that our joint savings would be subject to equalization. She explained that my pension and my RRSP, built over 31 years, were largely protected because of how I had structured them. I had been frightened. I had driven to that office frightened, and I left it less frightened than I had been in years. The papers were filed within a week. My husband called 12 times the first day. My daughter called 7 times. My friend, the former friend, called twice, which I thought showed either nerve or stupidity, probably both. I didn't answer any of them. I stayed with a colleague from work, a woman whose children were grown and who had a spare room and very good tea. She didn't ask me too many questions. She let me cry twice and didn't make a fuss about it, which was exactly what I needed. Here's what nobody tells you about betrayal when you're older. It isn't just about the person. I would have told you, if you had asked me before all this, that the worst part of a husband leaving was the loneliness, the public embarrassment, the sense of failure. I would have been wrong. The worst part was my daughter. My daughter was 40 years old. She had her own home in Innisfil, her own husband, her own baby, and she had known for some period of time, I never did find out exactly how long, that her father was having an affair with the woman who had been like an aunt to her since childhood, and she had said nothing, worse than nothing. She had sat beside him at that table, and when I walked in the door, she had said, "Come sit down, Mom," in the tone of someone managing a situation. She called me on the 3rd day. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry, that she had been put in an impossible position, that she loved me, that she hoped I understood. I did not call back. On the 8th day, she came to my colleague's door. I opened it because I could see it was her through the glass. "Mom," she said, "please, you sat beside him." I said, "You knew, and you sat beside him. I didn't know what to do. You could have called me any day in whatever time you knew. You could have called me and said, 'Mom, I know something you need to know.' That's what you could have done." She started crying. I felt my heart pull in 2 directions at once, because I am her mother, and I have loved her since before she was born, and I will love her until I am not here anymore. But love does not mean accepting that you were thrown away by everyone at once and pretending it didn't happen. "I need some time," I said. "I'm not gone, but I need some time." I closed the door. I stood with my back against it and my eyes closed for a long time. The house went on the market in January. Ontario winters are not ideal for selling, but my lawyer had advised a clean break and a quick process, and she was right. The house sold in 6 weeks for $412,000 above what we had paid for it in 1997. My share of the equity, after equalization, was significant. My husband had thought, I believe, that I would be desperate, that I would agree to whatever he proposed quickly because I was 63 and frightened and had nowhere to go. He had not counted on the fact that I had spent 31 years doing property assessments for the municipality. I knew exactly what that house was worth. I knew what every comparable property in that neighborhood had sold for in the past 18 months. I had the data in my head the way other people have song lyrics. His lawyer made an initial offer that I can only describe as insulting. My lawyer sent back a counter that was accurate. After 3 rounds, we settled. I won't say the number, but I will say that I was able to purchase a 2-bedroom condominium in Barrie, on the water, outright. No mortgage. Mine. My husband ended up renting a basement apartment in Alcona with my former friend who had left her own husband when everything came out. I heard this through mutual acquaintances. I did not seek the information out. My pension came through that spring. 31 years of service, and the municipality sent me off with a proper retirement event. There was cake and a card signed by everyone in the office, and a framed photograph of the building that I put in a closet. I was retiring earlier than I had planned. I had planned to work until 65. But I had enough, it turned out. I had planned quietly and well, even when I hadn't known I was planning for this. The condo had a balcony overlooking Kempenfelt Bay. On the first morning I woke up there, I made coffee and took it outside and watched the ice moving at the edges of the bay, the way it does in late March in this part of Ontario. It was 6:45 in the morning and the sky was the color of pewter and I was alone, completely alone, for the first time in 38 years. It wasn't what I had expected. I had expected it to feel like loss, and it did a little. But it also felt like something I didn't have a word for, something that I eventually just started calling mine. The coffee was mine, the silence was mine, the pewter sky and the moving ice were mine to look at for as long as I wanted without explaining myself to anyone. My daughter reached out in April. A letter, not a phone call. She had thought about it, she said, and she wanted to say things she could say better in writing than out loud. She said she had been wrong. Not that she'd been in a difficult position, not that she hoped I could understand her perspective. Just that she had been wrong, and that she was sorry, and that she would understand if I needed more time. But that she missed me. That her daughter, my granddaughter, had said my name for the first time last week, and she had cried, and she wanted me to know. I read the letter 4 times. I put it on my kitchen counter and walked past it for 3 days. Then I called her. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. We said the hard things, the ones we had both been carrying. She told me she had been afraid of her father, not physically, but that she had been so used to managing his moods, keeping the peace, that she hadn't known how to do anything else. I hadn't known that. I had been so focused on my own marriage that I hadn't seen what my daughter had been navigating inside it. That doesn't excuse it. She knows that. I know that. But it explains something. We met for dinner in May, the 2 of us, at a place in Barrie that she chose because she knew I liked the soup. She brought my granddaughter. My granddaughter, who is now almost 2 years old, sat in a high chair and ate pieces of bread and said my name, not quite right, but close enough, and looked at me with enormous dark eyes that are exactly like her grandmother's eyes, which is to say exactly like mine. I held her hand across the table. My granddaughter's hand, which is tiny and warm and grips your finger like it's the most important thing in the world. I'm not going to tell you I forgave everyone and everything fell back into place. Life isn't built that way, not at 63, not when you've had 31 years of your own professional life and a pension and a lawyer you called before the dust had settled. I know too much now to pretend that certain things can simply be unhappened. But I also know that I am sitting on my balcony over Kempenfelt Bay with my coffee, and my granddaughter will be here on Saturday, and my sister is driving down from Sudbury at the end of the month. My former friend and my former husband are renting a basement in Alcona. I hear they argue frequently. I have the water view. I have no mortgage. I have the pewter mornings and the lilac I planted in a pot by the balcony door because I have always grown lilascas and I was not going to stop now. I have everything I actually need. And some of what I need, it turns out, I had been quietly building for myself for 31 years without quite knowing why. My mother knew why. She always did.